Man, am I excited. We've got the Ground Power Stribog A3. Wait, this isn't it. That was the early ones. The A3, which has, no, wait, sorry, this was the second generation. Here we go. Ground Power Stribog A3 with the roller delayed blowback action. Super cool gun. That's what we're going to go over coming up next on GBGuns. So, you may recall I was the lucky one that got to start the Stribog madness in the US a couple of years back. Went over to the factory in Slovakia, and some of you were smart and caught on to the teaser we did of the SP9A3, their automatic, that used this blowback operation. I'll roll in some footage here if I can dig that up, but basically what delayed blowback does is provide some type of mechanical resistance until pressures drop before the bolt moves. Typically that makes for smoother action because it reduces the weight required for the bolt versus a straight regular blowback. It also suppresses better, which makes it a little bit quieter and makes for a much smoother shooter. So the weight of this mass moving is going to be less than the weight of this mass moving in the standard blowback operation. I'll get into that and show what that weight looks like and how that's made, but in case you're brand new to Stribogs, we'll go over from the top. There are notes in the video description where I get into certain sections. Also going to cover the change in magazines from the older style to what's now shipping with these A3s. So, from the beginning. Stribog is an old Slavic god of storm force, currents, gusts, all of that was believed to be part of Stribog's work. So you could say a god of storm or god of force. It is pronounced Stribog. Vowel, consonant, vowel. First vowel gets its full voice on most words in most languages, and I in its full voice is an E sound in the rest of the world, generally speaking. It is Stribog. What this is 9mm subgun type setup. We of course get them here in the US as a pistol, which is the cap on the end. This one has an SP tactical brace as equipped by the vendor that I bought it from. My two earlier models, I had a AR-15 buffer tube type adapter end plate that I then coupled with a Matador Arms sidewinder folder and an SP tactical brace. Keeps everything nice and tight. It is, however, a little bit heavier, but gave me that side folding option. The reason why I love these things so much and why I have 3 of them and 0 scorpions is the Stribog is shorter end to end, but has a longer barrel. Longer barrel is important because it means more velocity, which means more energy, so you're hitting your target harder with a smaller packaged firearm. You can see that, like all Ground Powers, all of the controls are completely ambidextrous. We've got our bolt lock and release here. Holding up on that locks it. I like it on this side because if you're shooting right-handed, all you've got to do is swipe down with the finger to release. It's a little stiff on here, probably because it's brand new. Here they are on the other side. Safety selector, magazine release, and your bolt catch and release. The lower half of the receiver is polymer. The top is aluminum. I believe it's extruded. You've got some M-LOK compatible slots here, rail on the bottom, full-length rail up top, and integrated sights front and rear. Leaving them down, you do have a little notch and blade, or you can pop them up for a white dot and peep style. But with all that rail out there and so many great red dots, of course the red dot's going to go on this thing. Taking a look inside the gun is what we'll do next. As we get ready to take this thing apart, I want to show you one thing that I love about European manufacturing. The Ground Power definitely does. You can see we've got a serialized chassis, serial on the lower receiver, a serial on the upper receiver, a serial on the bolt carrier and a serial on the barrel that all match. That's a very European thing. The manufacturing standards that Grand Power uses are absolutely phenomenal. Without going into specs, I can tell you that I personally know the barrel surface smoothness when they manufacture these barrels is done at 1/4 the European norm, as in how bumpy that metal can be. They do 1/4 of what's considered acceptable, and they go through and get the CIP stamping. You can see there that is sort of like Europe's SAMI, except we think of SAMI spec as just basic ammunition, but it also applies to firearms over in Europe, and this whole setup has been tested. So to get in the gun, you notice we have a takedown pin and a pivot pin. It's pretty simple. I did notice that this one, I don't know if it's because many thousands of these guns have been produced since my early ones, but it's finger pushable. That little pin right there, it is retained. You pull until it stops, and now your lower half can pivot free. In this case, it took the brace with it. There we go. So the lower half pivots free. That lets this back plate come down and out. It's easy. This is an aftermarket piece made by HP Industries. They're also the ones that made the non-reciprocating charging handle conversion I have on one of my earlier guns. From there, bring out our bolt and recoil assembly. Here's the recoil assembly. You can see it's a 2-piece rod, spring, and a nice big heavy-duty polymer buffer. And that's our bolt. And what just fell out there is the roller. Silky smooth machined roller. And there is a little claw right there, and that claw tries to pull on it, and under pressure the pin is up and prevents movement, and then the pin falls down and permits the thing to move again. It's a pretty genius system that has some twist room as well, which kind of helps lock things in place. But pin up, I can't pull this, pin down, get a lot more travel, and that's when the bolt starts to move. We will weigh this in comparison with the non-reciprocating charging handle version coming up in a bit to show you just how much less reciprocating mass there is. But on that, firing pin is spring-loaded. Very important consideration when you've got a quick operating gun. Having a non-spring-loaded firing pin or a heavy firing pin can result in slam fires, and that's where you get your unsafe bursts. So verify that that is done there. A little bit of end mill markings. You can definitely tell that production has ramped up. They are making as many of these in 1 month as they used to in about 6 months, not too long ago. Taking a look in our lower receiver. We've got the steel chassis inside here that is reinforced and holds a very AR-like trigger system. The trigger is, like most Grand Powers, very crisp, a little bit heavier. I want to say somewhere around 6 pounds or so. There have been aftermarket modifications I've seen out there of putting AR triggers in here to make them run. I don't do that. I like to test guns as they come out of the box, so the results that you see are what you can expect out of the box. We've got quite the sweeping undercut there. Let's see if I can get some extra light in there. For a giant feed funnel, and a little bit of beveling around the edge to aid in extraction. So our total barrel length there, I want to say, I think it's around 7 or 8 inches. It's been a while, but you can go back and, well, actually never trust specs you hear on a video. Just go look up what the manufacturer says. The charging handle is reversible. When everything's all the way back to this position, you can pull it through and swap it out to the other side. I like left side. That keeps the right hand, the firing hand, for me anyways, on the gun and ready to rock. There are aftermarket bolt stop and releases as well out there by multiple companies. Now let's take a look at the bolts and compare this guy to what was or what is the norm on the A1 models. So what we're looking at here is the older non-delay blowback bolt carrier and recoil system, or bolt and recoil system, and the delay blowback system. Is worth noting that the recoil part is separable more simply than it is from the older style. It is doable on here, it just requires some finagling. And this is a classic 9mm AR bolt. Now I brought this out to show you one of the ways that in your standard AR9 that they increase the mass, since there is no locking on this, it's just held through weight and spring pressure, is by inserting this large weight into the tail of the carrier. So we're going to weigh that as well, but you can see immediately a difference in how much shorter the new mechanism is compared to the old one, and hopefully that's going to be a less reciprocating mass. One of the ways that the original Stribog felt so soft to the shoulder as far as recoil from a blowback is that even though it was direct blowback, you had this shaft's mass forward, keeping some of the weight balance forward of your firing hand, so the gun doesn't rock as much as with one of these where all the weight is in the back. So let's get the scale out and we'll compare. So we've got our scale set up in ounces, and you can see it's 76.5 degrees in this room right now. It is hot between these lights. I'm going to start off with your AR9 carrier, or bolt if you will. Remember, this has the weight inserted in the tail. Also, don't forget, with AR9 setups you have a big spring and a buffer that are also part of the system. This by itself comes in at 15.4 ounces. Now we'll go with the original Stribog setup, which includes the recoil system and the buffer all together. 1 pound 11.3 ounces. So you can see this is a lot more mass, but like I said, it's counting the spring and the buffer itself. And our new roller delay blowback A3 Stribog setup at 1 pound 0.8 ounces. So a bit lighter there, and that's including the recoil assembly and the buffer. If we look at just our mass that is going to be moving back and forth, we're down to 14.7 ounces. So less than your standard AR9, plus your standard AR9 does not have this delayed blowback setup. Pretty cool. So another thing I was curious about is the new magazines. When I went over and visited the factory, they showed me some prototypes and some ideas. That was over a year ago, about a year ago, I don't recall exactly, but here they are. We get 3 of these that ship with the new A3, and they're not entirely the same thing as the old ones. Zoom in and take a look at some of the differences. So right off the bat, one of the things that I noticed looking at the front of them is the originals here are rounded to be very open on the front. Allows a lot of room for a round to be oriented a little off, whereas the new ones have these shoulders here, but there's not much to guide around there. Looks like it might actually catch rounds, so I'm curious how that's going to work out. The other thing I noticed right away, of course, these new metal ones have metal feed lips. You can see if I'm putting these magazines end to end, the metal feed lips appear to be a little bit taller than the polymer did, and also this stop here, this tail that sticks up a little more prominently, a slightly different angle. The followers themselves, get our camera to catch up with us. Let me zoom out a second. There we go. The followers themselves look to be a little different. We've got more of a tail here, or a slope on the new ones, whereas the old ones are curved downward. Get some angles there. So it's quite a different magazine, and the polymer feels a little different. If you're wondering why the changes, there were a lot of complaints about these things cracking or breaking, about the lips breaking on them. all kinds of complaints. I have about a dozen of these magazines that I've used over the years, including leaving them fully loaded for months on end. And aside from maybe some spring issues, unloading it after it's been loaded for a long time fully stuffed, I haven't had any other issues. So I do believe that problems were out there, but I just didn't experience any of them. Now, the polymer is definitely a different material. And the other thing that I noticed is the cut for the magazine catch on the new ones is considerably narrower than the original. I have not looked inside to see if the mag catch itself has changed, but having a narrower slot there means you're going to get this magazine theoretically into a more precise fitment than you would for here if they're using the same size claw. I don't know if they are or aren't, but definitely interesting to see. I do not know yet if these older ones are going to be compatible with the new gun or not. We will test that when we get to the range and definitely let you know. Speaking of range, other things that we'll do while we're out there, of course, our trademark What's for Dinner test. Often, well, I've noticed people are starting to copy it. That's why it's trademarked. But one more thing with the magazines here. Let's take some of this nozzler and take a look at how a couple of rounds sit in here. I'm curious if the presentation is going to be different. Definitely loads smoother. So looking at the tail end, yeah, we do have a different presentation there. Bring the camera back in for you. You notice on our new one, we're looking straight on at the back end of the bullet. On this one, it's got kind of a lift. And the presentation forward, our new one is coming straight forward. This one looks like it's going to be lifted a little bit. So may not be compatible. That'll be interesting to see. So when we get to the range, pending ammunition availability, this is being filmed in July of 2020, and ammo is really scarce, and we've got some other obligations, some contracted T&E to do that needs all the ammunition we can get our hands on. But when we do take this guy out to the range, you can rest assured it's going to get our signature What's for Dinner test, trademarked What's for Dinner test. We'll run a variety of loads through it, including hollow points, your flat nose, all kinds of different loads to see what it eats and what it doesn't. We'll do that unsuppressed, to be fair. Although suppressors are cool, I do recognize that less than 1% of gun owners have a suppressor, and suppressors add extra back pressure, and that can, intentionally or non, artificially cause different results in reliability than running it unsuppressed. And each suppressor creates a different back pressure level, manufacturer to manufacturer, type to type. So it's really tough to say that running one can means it runs on all cans, or if one can breaks it, that all cans will break it. That's one of the reasons why you don't see suppressors on our channel here. We're trying to be fair to the firearm and test it as is. But we might go through and do it again with a can on it, just out of curiosity. We'll do some accuracy and get some shooting impressions. I sure hope I was able to find the raw footage of shooting this roller delayed setup on full auto. If not, you can search the channel for Stribog and you'll see footage of it. Just real quick, there's that roller pin. Show you how this works. See how it comes up out of the way when the action starts moving? Except, of course, I'm pushing from the front, whereas when the gun fires, it's being pulled. So rather than this tail piece going first here, that's going to be happening reverse order. But it gives you some idea of how that works. And you can see it rolls pretty smoothly. Is it the new MP5? I don't know. We'll see when we get out to the range. But I'm very excited to have this thing in. We'll bring out the other two Stribogs as well and talk about similarities and differences in shooting impressions. Hope to see you on the range, and thanks for watching.